Hey, what's happening? So, there's a story that I talk about in my book about the first time that I really needed to adapt, or the first time that I purposely adapted. And what I mean by that is, and this is what's been going on in my head lately, is that there's been so much, I've been really thinking about my past because I've been working on my book. And, one of the things we changed in my book is trying to implement more personal stories to let hopefully have people understand more, to relate to themselves through my story. And when I in my book I talk about the first time I really, because there was examples from day one when I was in the hospital where I had to adapt, writing and so forth. But really, what it comes down to is I was out of the hospital for about a week, and my arm was still wrapped up, and I was on all kinds of pain meds and all kinds of stuff, and I was going to go to my friend's house. It was the first time I was driving, and I needed to change the fuel pump in my V8 Vega. So those of you know, when I built the V8 Vega, which is a Vega, and you stick a V8 in it, and so it was a pretty fast car. It was, So to make a long story short, so I had this brand new fuel pump that I had bought the week or so before I had gotten in a car accident and lost my arm, and I was in the hospital for a couple months. So, I started thinking, you got to change that fuel pump, dude. I didn't want to call. No, I had friends. I had lots of friends that were telling me, hey, Mike, I'll come over and change that fuel pump for you. And I was like, nah, no thanks. And then it was like the first time that I purposely had to figure out, how are you going to do this, dude? You know how to change a fuel pump. You've done it God knows how many times. How are you going to do it with one arm? So, the first thing I did is jack my car up, put it in jack stands, and that itself was, different. I mean, everything from the very start was just different. But then I just started thinking. I remember being underneath the car, and normally you take the fuel. First thing you do is you plug. You gotta stop the fuel pump. You put a crimp on it so that no gas comes out. I did all that stuff, but how am I going to unscrew this fuel pump, hold it at the same time, and do all this stuff? Stuff that before was really easy for me to do. So I just started playing around with using tape and different types of pliers and vice grips and stuff, and I did it. And I can't tell you the feeling I got for myself, and it's strange. People can say, here it is, a guy who has changed the fuel pump his whole, since I was 14, 15 years old. I've been changing fuel pumps. And here it is, and I'm so excited about the fact that I was doing it for the first time as the new Mike. And what I mean by that is, that's a revelation that came to me when I was in the hospital. And it actually took me a while to actually implement it, in the sense of where it really stuck to me. But I basically told myself that, dude, you're just a different person now. In the sense of, you need to think of yourself differently. Now, don't get me wrong. You've heard me talk about, you can't, you're disabled. You're still, you still have dreams, and you're still the same person. And I always talk about, nothing really changed me, but it did, because everything that I do different than I used to do. So the who I was inside didn't change. The Michael that liked to work on cars and spent 6-7 hours a day training in martial arts and was into music and all that stuff, that was still there. I just had to do all those things a little bit different. And then I remember driving up to my friend's house, and I pulled up, and my best friend Jeff, and he comes out of the house, and he's like, first thing he said, he's like, who helped you with your fuel pump? And I said, nobody. He goes, what? I said, I did it myself. And he was amazed that I did it myself. And that kind of stuck with me too. And what I mean by that is, I realized at that time, and I didn't actually realize it till later, but at that time, it was this realization in my head that there was a great deal of strength in adapting. There was a great deal of power in overcoming adversity and bad things happening to you. So it slowly started implanting this thing into my head where there wasn't anything I couldn't do if I wasn't willing to do it. And what I mean by that is I started realizing that, yeah, there are some things I can't do. I can't bench press no more. So I made an attachment that connects that I still have to this very day, some 30 something years later, that attached to my arm so I could do flies instead of doing bench press. So that changing of the fuel pump started this avalanche in my life of adapting. And almost this like drive inside of me to prove everybody else wrong. It's like, if you said, yeah, if someone said to me, you know, oh, that'd be hard for you to do, or you couldn't do that, that just made me think, oh, how am I going to do it? You know, and so I've just been really concentrating on myself, what's going on in my head right now. And the reason why I'm thinking about this stuff is because once again in my life, I am having to adapt. You know, I've been having a lot of issues with my neck and my shoulder. And it's, you know, I'm going to physical therapy like every single day, and I'm taking medicine, and I'm just, you know, and it can be kind of, you know, a downer because, you know, it's something you got to deal with though. But it's just making me feel, you know, even more confident in the Adapt for Life philosophies. And I call them the Adapt for Life philosophies because they're not really my philosophies. I might be the one who wrote them down in the book, but they really are just the philosophies of life. Because it's not like Mike Leo who went out and lost his arm and did this stuff. It's not as if I invented this stuff. It's just that I was, through the grace of God, able to figure it out. That this is why I was being successful. I mean, there's no other reason for me to be successful if you think about it. If you were to tell your friends, yeah, I know this guy who's got one arm, and because when I lost my arm, people had, you know, I got into a lot of fights. Now, I don't think people realize what I mean by a lot. I mean, we're talking daily I got into fights. I had a bad attitude, and I'd always been a scrapper. Like I said, I've been trained martial arts since I was 11 years old. You know, and, you know, and I've known since I was a pretty young age that I could fight, and I could fight better than most people. So, you know, these fights that I got into, what they did to me mentally was, now I don't want to get people thinking I was going around just beating people up or you know, it was just, it's easy to get in fights when you're not looking not to get into them. And I had a bit of a chip on my shoulder. And I think that chip carried with me for a long time. I mean, I remember going in 1998, I believe it was, or 98, when I went to test with Paul Vunak for my apprenticeship in Jeet Kune Do. And I remembered that telling myself, you're going to go down there, dude, and you're going to blow these guys away. You have to go down there and blow these guys away because you got one arm and you got to prove yourself beyond what they can do. Now, that goes back to the thing of me getting in fights because it was a thing within me that I needed to prove to myself that I could still be the same guy that I was before. Now, of course, like I mentioned before, I was a different guy. But deep down inside, I was that same person. How am I going to adapt to become the same person? And, you know, the old Mike before that was, you know, even though I got a lot of fights, I was always the kind of the anti-bully guy. You know, I'd go to parties and I'm always sticking up for my friends or sticking up for the guy who's getting picked on by a group of guys and so forth. And so right now, you know, I'm kind of going through the same thing where it's like there's some doubts in my head. And there's like this part of me that is like, why are you having to go through this again, dude? Why? You know, and that's the part of me that feels sorry for me. That's the part of me that's not going to accomplish anything. That's the part of me that I kick in the ass all the time and tell it to shut the hell up. But it's hard because, at 55 years old, I'm once again in therapy, and I'm once again having to lose weight because I just go down the list. But anyone who knows me and knows my philosophies, the Adapt for Life philosophies, teaches you, and I have taught myself, that everything in this world is your responsibility. Therefore, everything is my responsibility when it pertains to myself. Everything's your responsibility that has to do with you. So what's been going in my mind right now is, how am I going to go to this next level in my career? This, I'm starting all over again, and kind of doing this whole new thing with being a mentor and a public speaker, and using, and teaching people my philosophies, more of my philosophies than the actual martial arts stuff. So, and again, that has to do with a lot of confidence, because, see, as a Jeet Kune Do instructor, I have a great deal of confidence. Part of the reason why I have confidence as a Jeet Kune Do instructor is the fact that I'm teaching Bruce Lee's martial art. I mean, the greatest martial art that ever walked this earth, I'm teaching his martial art. And I was given permission by his top guy and his top guy. So that gave me a lot of confidence. But when it comes to Adapt for Life philosophies, those are my own kind of thing. And it's like, where's the confidence come from? Well, the confidence from me comes from me. From me understanding that, I didn't just write this book because, I wanted to write a book, and because believe me, reality is that's not what it's about. I wrote this book not because I wanted to write a book, because I wanted to share with wounded troops how I adapted and beat adversity. Now, of course, it grew from that to me wanting to really help everybody. But how can I help people if I can't help myself? I talk about this in the martial art world all the time. You have martial art instructors that have never been in a fight, have never sparred. You have that are teaching you how to fight. And I'm like, well, you guys have probably seen my videos talking about it. Well, it's the same thing with my philosophy. How can the Adapt for Life philosophies help you in your life if they can't help me? And so what's my daily struggle is really living up to Adapt for Life's philosophies. And that's the same thing I had to do with, and I do as a Jeet Kune Do instructor. I expect, my knowledge and experience and my ability as a martial artist has to be there all the time. My students can't come to me and ask me a question. I don't know. You gotta go ask somebody else, or I gotta have the answer for them, the right answer. I got to be able to show them. I got to be able to teach them the right way. So, lately I've been kind of really thinking about my past and what led me to where I am at today. And, there's a lot out there in this world. I know a lot of videos I have, and we have at Sifu Corp, are talking about political stuff. And those of you who know me know that I'm really in the politics, because I believe that politics is just a part of life. It's not something, it should be part of all of us. But I also believe that it's also, part of me and my belief system about being functional. When you hear me talk about politicians being, this way and that way, it's because I don't believe they're functional. I believe everything in life should be functional. Religion should be functional. I mean, as a Christian, I'm not going to sit here and tell you to go to this church or that church, but there are religions that are functional and religions that are not functional. So, Christianity is not the only functional religion. As a Christian, of course, I believe Christianity is right. But again, it comes down to functionality to you. And that's not the way it is with everything. So here I am, once again needing to kind of push myself in accomplishing things. And it gets difficult, and it will always get difficult, and sometimes it's easy and sometimes it's hard. But you know what? It's like that for everybody. I'm telling you right now that I know this from my own experience, that millionaires, billionaires, famous people, they have the same issues you have. They might not have financial issues, but they have the same issues you have. Everybody has issues, and everybody has to deal with stuff. You know, sometimes I find it hard for me to convey what I'm thinking, especially when it comes to wounded troops. As a lot of people know, I am really inspired by wounded troops. Going back to my personal life, I was going to go into the military. My dad was in the Navy. My grandfather, both of them fought. My dad in the Korean War, my grandfather in World War II. And I wanted to be a Navy SEAL. And I didn't go and join the Navy when I was supposed to. And to me, it's like I have this drive to really convey to wounded warriors how special they are and what they have done to this country and for the freedoms of the people across this world, and the sacrifice they have. And that's the main thing that drives me, is I look up, like right now I'm thinking, what kind of pussy are you, Mike? Okay? Your neck's hurt. Oh my God, you gotta go through therapy again. When there's guys out there that are in a lot worse shape than I have, that went through a lot worse than I ever could imagine. And how am I supposed to be a mentor to them if I'm going to complain to myself about, oh my God, you got to be in therapy again. Oh, boo-hoo. So, life is always a struggle. And my thing is, it's about adapting, not tapping out. Never tap, always adapt. Peace.